The Canes Insight Daily Podcast is brought to you by Anajar and Levine Accident Attorneys. If you've been involved in a car accident or any other kind of accident, if someone you care about has been involved in an accident, dial 1-800-747-FREE, 1-800-747-3733. Deal with experts. You don't want to put the case of your life in the hands of an amateur. Deal with people who do this all the time, who have investigators, medical experts, an experienced team that cares about you and will treat you like family. Take back control of your life. Call Anajar and Levine. Also want to thank Caneswear, the number one stop for Miami Heat, Miami Hurricanes, Marlins, Dolphins, Inter Miami, you name it, they have it up at the Arrowhead Plaza in Davie or at www.caneswear.com. You can order from anywhere in the country. They just got unbelievable selection of Adidas shoes, throwback Miami Hurricanes, baseball jerseys, starter jackets, you name it, they've got it. Just one click away at caneswear.com, or if you want to see the family environment, go to the store in Davie and visit the family. Caneswear.
This episode of the CanesInSight podcast is brought to you by our friends at Sallah Astarita Cox, a boutique law firm focusing on securities regulatory matters, broker-dealer and investment advisor regulation, white-collar criminal defense, complex commercial litigation, and securities arbitration and litigation. The firm aggressively represents clients throughout the nation. Contact them now at 561-989-9080 or visit them online at salahlaw.com.
It was a wild weekend for Canes baseball. Learned a lot about the team. Saw a lot of heart, a lot of excitement. Taking 2 out of 3 from the number 13th ranked Virginia Cavaliers. We're going to talk about all of it, what it means going forward, what we saw with Mr. Perfect himself, man who threw the 23rd perfect game in NCAA Division I history, Javi Salas. Javi, how you doing?
I'm good, D. Good to be here. Great weekend for the Canes, obviously. You know, you talked about some of the comeback wins. A lot of fun baseball to light this weekend.
Yeah, no, we were nervous. I mean, we put on a happy face for the pod, but once the mic turned off, we were a little nervous about this weekend, especially with some of the Wednesday nights and how they've been going. So you just, from what you saw, how much better do you feel about Miami now than you did maybe at this point last week?
Well, when we did the preseason pod, I said there's going to be a young team. There's going to be lumps in the road, and you're going to have to be willing to accept those bumps and play the long game with these guys, right? So let's back up to Wednesday. Miami's down 6-1 against Stonehill, right? Twitter's blowing up. I'm sure the forums are blowing up. The world was ending. Come back, win 7-6, kind of a survive and advance mentality, right? You obviously don't want to play an opponent like Stonehill that closely, but an ugly win is way better than a loss to Stonehill. Fast forward to Friday, come from behind victory. Canes pull one out 6-5. Daniel Cuvée, huge home run in the 7th inning. Saturday, a 30-year historic comeback for the Canes, a comeback that hasn't been, Mark Light hasn't seen the likes since 1992, a 9-run deficit erased. And then Sunday, again, come from behind, have a chance to win the game late in the game, and ultimately you surrender one game to Virginia. But a 3-1 week for this Hurricane Ball Club. Big success for JD. I think a lot of building blocks. You touched on that in your open. The heart, the character of the team definitely exposed itself this weekend. Something that, I'm sure this coach and this staff will definitely push forward as the season progresses.
Oh, yeah, I was there on Friday for that Cuvée home run. Awesome moment. And I'm wondering, you who played the game at a high level, that comeback mentality, once you've seen it happen before, because it seemed like after the Wednesday game, they believed they could do it in every game, and really they did, even the game on Sunday.
Right.
So what is that comeback mentality? How do you develop it? How real is that from the inside?
I think, a comeback is like a double-edged sword, right? You don't want to make it a habit, but you want to know you have that ability in your back pocket to not, as a team panic. There's no, wavering of the process. You understand that, we know what we can do as a team, whether we're ahead, behind, we know what we're capable of. So that aspect is really cool to see, especially from a young ball club, right? You look at our 2, 3, 4 hitters, all underclassmen, right? So you have Blake Sear, sophomore, Daniel Cuvée batting third as a freshman, Jason Torres as a sophomore. So the meat of our order is all underclassmen, and for them not to waver, for them to, continue pressing forward. That Friday game, Daniel Cuvé's at bat was one of those ultimate Mark Light moments, man. I was watching on TV. I wasn't there. I wish I was there, to witness it. But he comes up, and you mentioned it right before we hopped on. You knew something special was bound to happen. And once that team starts believing, it's a scary thing. It's like an avalanche, and it led into Saturday, and it's something that they're going to continue to harp on as the season goes on. You can't teach chemistry. You can't teach intangibles. A team that wants to win and understands that regardless of what that scoreboard shows, they have a chance is a dangerous ball club.
Now, some of this is intangible, and some of it really is tangible, right? As far as when you look at the scores here, you have a team that can hit a lot of home runs and a team that maybe the pitching right now is not where you want it to be once this team really gets rolling, explaining some of these wild games. So let's start from the hitting side. What are you seeing positive from this ball club swinging the bat?
Well, I mean, the home run, right? We talked about it at the Open, 34 home runs on the season thus far. I mean, over 2 a game. That's an incredible clip. We talked about a couple weeks ago, how are they going to replace Yo-Yo Morales, CJ Kayfis, Zach Levinson, that were responsible for 60-plus home runs, give or take, last year's ball club? We're seeing that and more from this year's team, right? Like Daniel Cave's 8 home runs on the season. We're 1 week into ACC play. Jason Torres is right behind him, with 7. But, I mean, you start to look at the on-base percentage, the slugging percentage of this team. Like, this offense is legit. Like, when you go pound for pound looking at this lineup, it's very top-heavy, but you got a guy like Dorian Gonzalez. We haven't even mentioned him, right? He's had huge home runs on the season, has come up in clutch spots. Belen guy. I know you want to throw that in there.
Yep.
So, like, it's a top-heavy lineup, but it's a long lineup. It's difficult for teams to get through. And you talk about, like, a 9-run comeback, right? Like, what's the anatomy of a 9-run comeback? And it's an imperfect science, right? Virginia's got the game for all intents and purposes. It's a 6th inning. They're up by 9. Like, you start counting outs at that point. You trade an out for a run. Your 9-run lead, you got to get 7 or 8 outs to get. And Miami puts it together, and it's the fear of the long ball. Like, Miami has the ability to home run at any given point. You put a couple runners on base, and there's a huge threat of a home run, especially if your top 3 guys are up to bat. So, I mean, look, it's a team that is a lot of fun. You mentioned some of the issues pitching-wise, but this lineup is legit. It's tough for teams to face. And look, I've been in the ACC a long time. I watched a lot of baseball. Virginia is not a slouch opponent. Virginia is not a team that you just, you have to beat Virginia to beat Virginia. You earn those wins. They're really fundamentally sound ball club. Brian O'Connor always has his guys ready to play. So there's a huge feather in the cap for that lineup to show there's a proof of concept. We can hit guys, and we can hit with the best in the country.
In terms of the pitching, I feel like you have the starting pitching. There's been some inconsistency. Middle relief, there's been some issues. Robert has been consistent, probably the most consistent, but then Sunday gets tired.
Right.
What needs to happen to get this unit a little more stable and consistent?
Right. And it's hard to say, right, when you have so many young guys, especially pitching in different roles. Like, JD always used to talk about this, is everyone comes to the University of Miami as a starting pitcher, right? In high school, these guys were probably the ace, the 1 or 2 guys for their high school. They haven't had to relieve. They haven't had to come in a dirty inning, runners on base, tension in the game. So, like, you're teaching a lot of young guys to pitch in high leverage, high stress situations, right? And granted, they have to learn at some point. The training wheels got to come off. We've seen that with Nick Robert. He's been a revelation for this ball club. Now he's the closer. Friday, Saturday night was nails. Sunday, 3rd day of a back-to-back-to-back. He pitched on Wednesday as well. So, like, you kind of give him a pass there, but we need someone to step up in those middle relief roles to be like, hey, I can be the bridge. I can get you 6 or 7 outs on a Friday night. I can get you from Gage Zeal to Brian Walters. I can get you from Gage Zeal to Nick Robert. There needs to be someone that steps up. I'm looking at the Jordan Vargas of the world. I'm looking at Ashton Crowther, Miles Caba, Brandon Oliveira. There's a group of guys there that I think JD and Coach Gutierrez are just waiting for someone to step up. It might not be this weekend. It might be, who knows when it comes, but someone needs to definitively step up in that role and say, I can be the middle relief guy and start bridging the gap in some of these games.
Now, switching gears to somebody who was the face of the team coming into the season in Blake Sear. I'd never played baseball, so I don't know what's going on in his head. He's dealing with so much between the pressure, having to step away for personal reasons, not playing in the infield. And it seemed from the outside like, there was some frustration, and, it was tough for him against Stonehill, first game of the Virginia series, and now coming huge with the Grand Slam, played well on Sunday. What are you seeing from Sear, and just mentally for someone who did not play at that high level? I mean, how do you what are some of the things that a player like that has to deal with?
Right. And I think you nailed it right on the head, right? Like, he missed a full week of the season to deal with some personal issues. And, Blake's a great guy. Everyone that I've talked to says, speaks really highly, speaks so well of this kid. And everyone's just rooting for him to come back to his form, right? Last year, he has a tremendous freshman campaign. Now he's sort of the face of the program. He's the guy that everyone's circling on their scouting reports, and pitching coaches are pitching around him. So ultimately, I think there was a little bit of a pressure aspect. He was pressing a little bit, but that Stonehill home run, right? Like, we're down 6-1. Blake Sear opens the scoring up, hits a 3-run home run, relieves the pressure on the ball club, right? Like all of a sudden it's okay. We broke the dam. Let's get the ball rolling. And then, that Saturday home run was something out of a storybook. Like you see that, and you see him rounding first base. He's pointing up to the sky. Like the emotions he must have had rounding the bases. And you can get behind a guy like that. Like that's the kind of thing where Blake Sear might go off the next 3 weeks and it might be a totally different ball player. We're not even talking about the first 2 weeks of the season anymore. We're not talking about his struggles. I mean, we're talking about his struggles. He's hitting 302, right? With 5 home runs. So it's like, Blake Sear struggling is anybody else's best day, right? So I think it just goes to the standard that he has set for himself, the standard that he set for himself last year, the type of player that we think he is, the ceiling that he has. It was really cool to see. And honestly, that Saturday night home run, I got goosebumps talking about it just a second ago. Like that was one of the cooler moments I've seen at Mark Life Field.
No, that's it seems like just him going changes the dynamic of the team.
Right.
Just because everybody, he's a veteran almost on the team, even though he's only a sophomore, right? He's the guy with returning production, the only guy with returning production on the team, right? To that level. So.
Right. And you're talking about like a veteran guy being a sophomore, right? So it's like, if you're a Hurricanes fan, you got to be excited about, Jason Torres, sophomore, Blake Sear, sophomore, Daniel Cavey, freshman. Like these are 3 guys that are cornerstones of your program that are all underclassmen. So granted, these games there are a lot of 50-50 games here that we're playing, but they're fun, man. You got to be excited. You got to enjoy the process of these guys learning. I talked about it last week. Development and winning is the toughest thing to do in baseball. It's the toughest thing to do in professional baseball. We see teams that tank purposefully just so their young guys can get meaningful reps. Like this University of Miami, there's never going to be a tank year, but these guys are learning and winning at the same time, and it's really cool to see.
Now, shifting gears to the person who's protecting Sear in the lineup, Daniel Cuvée. We talked about him last pod, how you wanted the community to really embrace this guy as the superstar he is. Obviously, superstar performance on Friday and Saturday, hitting the go-ahead home run on Friday, massive home run on Saturday on a 3-0 count. Sunday has a tough time, 5 at-bats, 3 strikeouts. What did you notice different about how Virginia was pitching to Cuvée, and what adjustments does it need to make going forward?
Well, yeah, D, I'm a pitcher, man. So, like, I lost sleep over guys like Cavey in a lineup, right? So I know very well that I won't let Daniel Cavey beat me. Now, this lineup, there's dudes everywhere, so it's tough to say, like, oh, let's pitch around Cavey. Like, oh, I want to face Jason Torres. I don't want to face a guy who's hitting 440, right? But the way they pitch Cavey on Sunday is what I anticipate the rest of, the conference slate will look like. A lot of sliders, a lot of pitches down and away, a lot of pitches out of the zone. And, if I'm trying to help Daniel Cavey and help his development, I'd be like, dude, you've proved yourself by far in a way that you are a tremendous talent. You're going to be on every short list for freshman of the year. You're going to be ACC freshman of the year, probably. Like there's no telling how, the ceiling on your career. Now, the next step of your development is figuring out how to understand that you are the focal point of every scouting report. Pitchers are not going to want to throw to you. So he's going to have to, take his at-bats in stride. It's the Yo-Yo Morales treatment. Last year, Yo-Yo Morales would go at-bats where he'd get one pitch to hit, and you got to capitalize on that one pitch. Daniel Cavey is going to be the same thing. He might get one pitch a game, a couple pitches a weekend. He's got to be patient. You got to let these guys throw their balls. They're not going to throw him pitches to hit. He's shown power to all fields. I mean, on Friday night, he went over the scoreboard, man. I mean, it was a towering home run. It was one of those things that you're like, why are they throwing to him? And I'm not a Virginia fan, but I'm thinking, why are they throwing to him? Like in this situation, let somebody else beat you. I can happily go to bed if somebody else beat me that's not named Daniel Cavey. So next step in his development is really understanding how pitchers are trying to approach him. I'm sure these conversations are being had with Coach Fenster, with Coach Arteaga, but his ceiling is unbelievable, man. I'm so excited to see what the rest of this year looks like, and then the next 2 years in a Hurricanes uniform.
In terms of, look, we know 2, we know 3, we know 4. Any other lineup changes that you might see, at least not permanent or just, experimenting with things like players you might see more of going forward based on what you've seen so far?
Yeah, it was interesting yesterday. Lucas Costello wasn't in the starting lineup. I think he's one of those guys. He was brought in as a, veteran player, savvy around the ACC. They bring him in the middle of the game, probably the 6th inning. He hits a home run late. That looks like something he might get on track. I like what I see out of Jake Kulikowski. He's a freshman. The numbers aren't there yet, but the tools are all there. He's another one of those guys, like, play the freshman. Let's let these guys develop, get live reps. I talk about developing and winning. Like, this is going to be one of your guys next year. You got to see what you got right now. I expect Jake Kulikowski to, have an effect later on in the season for this team. And look, this is an imperfect science. Baseball development is not linear. Guys, go through streaks where, it looks like the world is ending and all of a sudden it clicks for them, a la Blake Sear. So I expect Kulikowski, Costello, 2 guys that we could see making an impact the next couple weeks in ACC play.
In terms of the games coming up this week, you got FAU, UNC. Starting with FAU, Miami struggled with midweeks.
Yeah.
Almost lost to Stonehill. The UCF game was a tough one. The Gulf Coast game was a tough one. How do they avoid those mistakes starting with FAU?
Right. And look, we go back and we say the UCF game was a tough one, right? Last week they go out and beat Florida at Florida, right? So it's one of those things where the midweek games are such a focus if you want to be in the field of 64, if you want to be a host. And look, I'm not predicting anything for this team. I've said that there's a young ball club. We're going to be excited with what we get. You got to start winning the midweek games. It has to be a focus. I think tomorrow Wednesday, we're going to see a renewed focus from this ball club. Last Wednesday against Stonehill, you almost have, a really a back-breaking loss for your tournament resume. Fortunately, they come back and win. FAU is a good opponent, in-state opponent. They're going to have guys from Dade and Broward County. It's going to be a tough game. And then you want to build momentum. You got to win Wednesday, and then you got a tough UNC team coming in, for the weekend. And we just went over it before we started. 6 ACC teams in the top 25, absolutely loaded. Carolina's coming off a weekend sweep of Pittsburgh. So you always know what you're going to get from a Carolina team. They're going to have good pitching, good hitting. They got a couple stars in their lineup. Again, it's a great weekend at Mark Light. You don't really know what you're going to get out of this ball club, but I think that's the fun in it. We're seeing a lot of young guys. We're seeing a lot of guys develop, get meaningful reps. And then, the star power's there with our 2, 3, 4 hitters. So I'm excited for this weekend. And
you're talking to people, obviously you're talking to alumni. I know you talked to JD, just the vibe around the team right now after everything that's happened and the ups and downs. What just the sense you get general, doesn't have to be specific. You heard this or that, just general vibe you get around the team.
Well, look, I mean, I'm around, I'm pretty close to the program. I go to a lot of games and I think what Friday and Saturday does for a team, it'll never show up. It's one of those, we talk about intangibles all the time. Do you and I think the same about that kind of stuff? Like, I want to know what my guys are made of before I go into battle. And I think coming back in baseball is so hard because there's so many variables and it's an imperfect science to come back. Like, a lot of fortunate breaks have to happen. In Stonehill, it was, Stonehill's bullpen kind of gave us the game in a sense where they walked a bunch of guys. Friday and Saturday, Miami took the game by, the bull by the horns, right? They hit their way back into those games. It was something that was really impressive. So the vibes are high. I think, the record being 9-6, obviously you'd like to take care of business a little bit more, win some of those midweek games. It looks a little bit different, but I think the team is trending in the right direction. Look, man, the ACC is a beast. I mean, week in and week out, you're going to be tested. It's one of the tougher conferences in all of college baseball. So the fact that that what you have in that locker room, you have a bunch of guys that aren't going to quit. There's a lot of unanswered questions. We talk about the bullpen, middle relief, but you have 3 cornerstone guys in your lineup that you can count on to really put fear and strike fear in opponents. And I think that's the beauty of this team right now.
Man, it's exciting. I know we'll be out there at the Light. I'll be out there on Friday. Are you going out there this weekend?
I'll be there. I'll be there Friday night, man.
Yeah, it should be fun. I had my son trying out for the football team there, sacking the shake. I told him, you got to come through, bring your shoulder, pump your legs. Don't let that shake, shake the tackle. He got juked initially, but he stayed with his legs. And then when the shake's a lot bigger than him, came down, made an ankle pick type of tackle, got low, and brought the shake down. So we got video of that, Pete.
That's one of your prouder moments as a parent.
There was a lot of coaching involved. I wanted the initial hit. I wanted him to crush him initially, but the shake made a nice move. But it's important to stay with it and to pump your legs. And if they're bigger than you got to eventually just get low and trip them up. And that's what he did. So nice job, Eli. He's more of a baseball player, but we're starting some of the football too, maybe a two-way guy. Cuvée, man, he could probably play football, man, with his size. It's amazing.
He's a freak, man. He's a total freak. And it's cool to see because you don't give him enough credit for being an athlete. Like, you see him move at third base and you see him run the bases. Like, he's not just a lumbering power guy. He's an athlete. He's a total freak. And I said it last week, man, get out there while you get the chance. Take your kids, go see this guy play, go see Blake Sear, go see Jason Torres. There's so many guys in this Hurricane lineup that are worthwhile. And look, people love offense, right? Like, you want to see high scoring games, go watch the Canes.
Absolutely. Javi, appreciate you. Sallah Astarita Cox, appreciate you. And we will be, we'll keep doing this, man. Baseball content, we're keeping it coming. Nowhere else we'll be covering Canes baseball like CanesInsight.com, and the forums, man, are popping. They're going crazy. All these game threads are like 8 pages long. People just ups and downs, especially this year. You don't want to read the wrong page because it can seem like the world's ending, and then you get the best team ever. So
a lot of pitching coaches on the forum.
Oh yeah. What else is new? All right, man. I appreciate you, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks, D.